I found out about the Kootenay explosion watching television news in a motel in Yarmouth County, and I immediately called Halifax to find out whether my husband's name was amongst those that were killed on board the HMCS Kootenay, and I was told that his name was not on the list. So therefore I assumed that everything was all right, and it was approximately 12 hours later when I arrived at my parents' home in Shelburne County and found Father d'Entremont, who was my parish priest in Shelburne, and I believe he was also the chaplain for CFB Shelburne at the time, waiting for me in my family's living room.
We went to England. I was admitted to hospital there. I was treated very well. I visited some of the men that were there for smoke inhalation and other problems. I met 2 or 3 fellows that came in just to say hi, all kinds of duty-free cigarettes, and always their condolences. They were as upset as everybody else, and unfortunately, a few of them were admitted to hospital for, I would say, nervous conditions. After the funeral at the chapel, I was taken to a hotel where my mother and sister had joined me, and Tom was buried at sea on Thursday, apart from his other buddies.
The one thing that still stands out in my mind is that I was told that I was allowed to take one person and one person only with me, and my husband's parents were not allowed to go from Quebec. They were not allowed to go to their son's funeral. Once we got to England, everything seemed to be very well organized and very well looked after while we were there. Once we came home, I certainly feel that we were abandoned as far as contact with officials were concerned. I think there are lots of things that can be learned from what happened to the families from the Kootenay, and I don't begrudge anything that the current widows and families are receiving. I envy them. I feel like we were cheated when I see what is happening today, because to exclude a man's family from his funeral service, it really, still really bothers me.
In retrospect, we find that, what caused that overheating in that gearbox was, of course, a bearing that was improperly put into the gear casing and causing it to overheat. In many years, not many years, but initially those gear casings were fitted with little brass thermometers that were manually read by the watch keepers in the engine room and recorded, at least certainly every hour when they did their rounds in the engine room. But these were susceptible to being broken off, and they never replaced them in any of the ships. I don't know if they even supplied them any longer, but anyway, those holes, fittings were plugged, and there was no monitoring of the temperature on the main gear casing bearings any longer.
I think I'd like to mention the fact, and what really was the killer on the Kootenay was the fact that the exhaust for the engine room was reversed. The Kootenay had the main intakes air intakes sat over the gearboxes, and the exhaust for the air was directly behind us. And the forward bulkhead of the engine room directly in the ladder, and our only escape route, and it just kept sucking the fire into us. We couldn't escape the fire.
A lot of young people did things that weren't expected of them. And like I said before, that lead to Seaman Tiffin, he definitely saved quite a bit in that cafeteria. But the sad part, I never ever seen him again. He got posted, I think he went out west, and I never ever got to thank him personally. But that's quite a few years ago now, but I always think back of that day, how he was there, and his voice woke us all up. It seemed like he guided us out was glad it's all over, and hopefully it never happens again.
The retrieval of the people from the engine room was pretty hard. Pretty much an eye-opener what really happens when things go wrong.
There's people higher up than those of us on the ship that their job is to maintain a level of safety. But I think that I would like to see that safety precautions are enforced, are utilized, and the complacency, just the general comfort level when you go into a situation like full power trials. Be stressed, and I think the human aspect of it, 4 weeks after the Kootenay, they lost 4 people in the avgas tanks on the Bonaventure, and again, that was basically the cause of that was lack of safety, and safety is a major thing.
One of the real issues that I learned from this whole affair was the fact that there was no section-based teams available, because most of the people that would have led those teams and organized them were either killed in the fire or were otherwise trapped in areas where they were severely smoke inhalated and were not available to us. The great thing about the whole affair was that these young people who were not normally section-based persons at all were called to service, and they, because of all the training they'd received here in the damage control school, not only during their initial training, but each time they worked up a ship, that they were certainly able to immediately fall into place and do what was necessary to get that fire under control. And that the structure and organization that we had in place, though it looked very well on paper, it didn't really work, because we didn't have a damage control headquarters, and the people that should have set up the secondary damage control headquarters weren't able to do so. The people that would have led the normally designated damage control teams were not available. So the real key to the success there was, of course, people stepped in and got the job done. So if you're planning for a disaster, make sure that you have Plan B and even Plan C, because nothing is going to happen as you planned it. The placement of firefighting, damage control equipment, and also the structure and organization within the ship, where you muster people. I mean, when the disaster occurred, piping people to emergency stations doesn't always work. Maybe you don't want them in emergency stations, so there should be some flexibility depending on the circumstances. In Kootenay's case, for example, the pipe should have been a muster on the quarterdeck, because the people that would have gone to certain areas for emergency stations couldn't get there, and then of course stumble around wondering where they should be. So there should be some alternative to all of these plans when a real disaster occurs. If you take the time to plan it well ahead and to think of these issues, then probably you're going to be far better prepared to deal with the disaster when it strikes. And believe me, it will eventually. Hopefully not in your time, but in somebody's time, it probably will.